Anglican Council of Indigenous Peoples and what it is?
The Anglican Council of Indigenous Peoples is a body representative of Indigenous peoples from across the Anglican Church of Canada. And they come together a couple times a year. And they basically come together to work in the spirit, as I see it, to work in the spirit of honoring the vision of the elders who in 1994 signed a statement called A Journey of Spiritual Renewal. And in that journey of spiritual renewal, they held out before all Indigenous peoples across our church the vision of building a truly Indigenous church within the Anglican Church of Canada. They were very clear it was not going to be a separate church, a parallel church. It was to be a church within the Anglican Church of Canada, notwithstanding the history. They wanted a truly Indigenous church within the Anglican Church of Canada. And then they extended their hand of partnership to all the rest of the church to journey with them in this in fulfilling this vision. So from my perspective, that has been the focus, particularly since 1994, of the work of the Anglican Council of Indigenous People. And in doing that work, they meet, of course, in circle. The National Indigenous Bishop is always present, of course, for the meeting. The primate is often invited to ACIP to listen and to speak only when invited to speak. And so over the years, ACIP, in the spirit of the 1994 covenant, has placed before the whole church a number of statements and declarations and ministry plans. So the current ministry plan that ACIP has placed or is placing before the church is called a prophetic pastoral care. And it's a ministry plan that will roll out across the country, very much rooted, of course, in gospel-based discipleship, and that becoming the very heart of what happens in Indigenous communities all across the country, and then building ministry plans that enable the gospel to be lived and celebrated. ACIP often brings things to the Sacred Circle, which is every 3 years, and Sacred Circle often refers things to ACIP for further consideration. So to get the parallels for Indigenous peoples within our church, Sacred Circle is, and we have to be careful what kind of language we use, but it's kind of akin to a General Synod. Kind of.
Yes.
And ACIP is kind of like the Council of General Synod. So that gives you some sense of what ACIP is and the kind of work that it has done.
You talked a bit about the background and resolutions. We also want to know what self-determination is. It's a word that gets around everywhere politically and within our chiefs and council. How does that affect us in the Anglican Church, self-determination?
Well, it's a very important word, Jerry, I think, in church circles. Because we all know the painful history and the sad legacy of the colonial church and our complicity with a federal government policy of assimilation that was enforced through the residential schools, which the churches basically ran, not only our church but others as well. And so we have this rather tragic history in which we, as I would put it, we robbed people of their own culture, their own spirituality, their own languages, and God has called us to account, and we've made apology, and we're trying to faithfully live into that apology 25 years later. And I've often said we can never weary as the church of saying we are sorry for what we did. And we can never weary of making efforts to make sure that words of apology have integrity. So as Michael Pierce said, words without actions are empty. So we have this long history of a need for apology, a need for reconciliation and for healing, a need for forging together better relations, right relations, relationships that are grounded and rooted in respect for the dignity of people. And that was the tragedy of the residential schools, is we robbed people of their own identity, their own dignity as being made in the eyes and the love of the Creator. When I think about self-determination, we have to keep that history in mind. And so to say people are becoming self-determining means that we are endeavoring to honor who they are and not what we try to make them become. And self-determination is writ large, as you would know, in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Now, some people get into, self-determination. Well, what does that really mean? Does it mean self-governance? Does it mean self-sustaining? Does it mean self-this, self-that? For me, self-determination means that we actually are honoring the articles that are adopted by the United Nations with respect to Indigenous people's rights. And so that's for me what it really means. Our church endorsed the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in 2010. And then when the TRC issued its calls to action, it challenged all the parties to the settlement agreement to not only endorse the UN Declaration, but put a plan in place as to what's that going to look like? How's that going to roll out? And so for me, I have some sense of deep gratitude and joy and excitement that honoring a public endorsement of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples manifests itself in developments within our church where Indigenous people are in fact becoming more and more self-determining. They are building an Indigenous church. And the other thing that excites me about it is that, it's happening in all kinds of different ways. There's no blueprint for the national Indigenous church, right? Because there are many nations of Indigenous peoples, right? And so nations, according to their own culture and history and spiritualities, are beginning to shape the church in their own context. And so it's different from one nation to another. It's different from one diocese to another. It's even different within dioceses, depending on who the Indigenous peoples are there. So it's exciting to see that beginning to unfold. And in very concrete ways, in our church. We've got the Indigenous Spiritual Ministry of Mishamakwish in Northern Ontario. We've got ministries in Northern Saskatchewan and Northern Manitoba now. We've just elected two more Indigenous bishops in the Arctic, yes. Which, when I became primate, there was one Indigenous bishop. That was Mark MacDonald. Now we have 12 Indigenous bishops. And they are First Nation, they're Métis and Inuit. So it's very exciting to see that kind of leadership emerging. And the church making provisions in some cases for Indigenous people to elect bishops in their way, not in our Western way.
Yes. Yeah. I just want to commend you on Primate Pierce and yourself. They're very supportive of Indigenous changes within the Anglican Church, and I think it's important to have really good leadership at the top to lead us in the right direction. And you've listened to us, you've talked to us, and you've been a very humble man. I almost think you're one of us, so, you know. So you don't have the cheeks, so. But thank you so much for all that work, and totally appreciate it. So, got a few more questions, so if you don't mind. 2 more hours? So with the resolution coming to the General Synod, how are they related to making progress towards self-determination within the Indigenous Church? Why is this important, and why now?
Mm-hmm. So it's wonderful, actually, that General Synod is being held here in Vancouver this year, because this year is the 25th anniversary of the Covenant. And so to come to a General Synod where celebrating that anniversary we'll be making some significant decisions about self-determination is really quite lovely. When we talk about some of the resolutions that are coming before the General Synod, one of the first things the Synod will entertain is a motion that will enable partners, Indigenous partners to General Synod appointed by ACIP, that they in fact by resolution will become members of Synod. Mm-hmm. No longer partners, but members with voice and vote. So that's a significant development, and that resolution will take place within the first few hours of the Synod. I've asked Bishop Mark MacDonald to preach the opening service for the General Synod with the theme I've called you by name. There will be other changes to the canon on National Indigenous Ministry, one of which will be that the National Indigenous Bishop in future would be styled as an Archbishop. Can't you just see Bishop Mark MacDonald styled as an Archbishop? Yes, I know he'll have to get a new jacket, Jerry. But he would be styled as an Archbishop and ranked with the 4 provincial metropolitans. So when, for instance, the Primate and the 4 metropolitans meet, as we do from time to time, the National Indigenous Bishop would be at that table. And it makes sense because the National Indigenous Bishops' ministry is not unlike that of a metropolitan or a primate in that the sense that their vision and responsibilities for pastoral oversight goes beyond one diocese. Mark is National Indigenous Bishop, has a relationship, and the canon will be amended to reflect this with all Indigenous peoples in the Anglican Church of Canada, and that he exercises that ministry in consultation with the diocesan bishops. So that'll be one development. And another development will be with respect to the Anglican Council of Indigenous Peoples being able to make decisions of its own, and the Sacred Circle to make decisions of its own with respect to some amendments to the canon of National Indigenous Ministry. We over the years, we've had a situation at every Sacred Circle where when it comes to appointing ACIP, they move into 4 provincial caucuses, like we do at General Synod, to elect cogs. So, but they're only allowed to have 2 people from each of the provinces. Well, you know, we discovered at the last Sacred Circle that in reality, you know, if this is going to look right, then there should be more representation from the province of Rupert's Land, which is half the country, than perhaps there could be from the province of Canada, where the numbers of Indigenous people are simply not as great as they are in the central part of the country. So some capacity for ASIP to be able to make those kinds of decisions and adjustments without coming back to General Synod for its permission, blessing, or whatever. And then there's conversation around amendments to the canon that will enable Sacred Circle and ASIP to look at something like a constitution. I doubt if that will be the language, a constitution, but some kind of a document, a statement that describes the nature of the self-determined Indigenous Church within the Anglican Church of Canada. So they're happy developments for our church and for Indigenous peoples within it.
For me, it's a first that a huge body like the Anglican Church is making official changes on how we determine things. The federal government, provincial government, any of the governments don't have that. They still are tied to the laws. And I really appreciate, again, the Anglican Church really making an effort to connect to our community, and especially in the northern parts of Canada. I mean, it's just amazing that people have come down to our meetings, and I'm very impressed with their passion for getting it right. So, and they still speak their language. Like, it's very difficult for them to hear what we're trying to say at our meetings, and yet they're determined to hear and listen. And, you know, it's just amazing. So.
One of the things, just on that point, Jerry, that you know, when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was doing its national gatherings across the country, at almost every single one of the commissioners would find their way to either Bishop Mark or myself or other people there representing the Anglican Church of Canada, and they'd want to hear just a little bit more about what they were picking up in terms of the Anglican Church of Canada doing the kind of thing you just spoke of. You know, creating space for self-determination to be real, and not just something we keep talking about, but that, you know. So when Mishamakwish came into being, I mean, the commissioners of the TRC were quite interested in that, you know, and wanted to know, how did that happen, and how are you continuing to support it? So I think that's good, and I think that part of self-determination too is that, you know, we don't sit there and say, well, how can we help Indigenous people to be self-determined? And Indigenous people don't sit there and say, how are they going to help us be self-determined? We actually have a conversation. And it's out of the conversation that things begin to emerge, and people who are not Indigenous, and I speak for myself, are learning so much from Indigenous peoples about how to be together, how to live together with some difference, how to discern the Spirit's voice in the midst of a circle of voices, how we make decisions in ways very different from what we're accustomed to. And so there's that kind of learning that goes on. And I think that the other thing about self-determination that's exciting is when we see conversations beginning to emerge between the church and local chiefs and councils, and the kind of spirit of openness and generosity that begins to emerge. Let me tell you, last weekend I was in Old Crow in the Diocese of Yukon with Bishop Larry Robertson, furthest northern point in that diocese, inside the Arctic Circle, and they were consecrating a new church. Imagine, they were consecrating a new church in Old Crow, St. Luke's. Now, the old St. Luke's is falling down, and they had to build a new church. But because of the spirit of cooperation between the church, the diocese, and the local chief and council in that community, the old Northern store, which was once the Hudson's Bay store, the old Northern store was moved from one part of the community to that part of the community where the old St. Luke's Church stands. It's going to become heritage property, I think, someday. And they converted this old store into their new church. And one of the things that was wonderful was the chief and council were so excited about this development and the way in which the diocese was supporting this, that they made a very substantial gift of almost $200,000 to do the conversion that needed to happen inside the building to turn it into a worship space. And one of the things that I was sharing with folks last weekend was, it's a really nice church they've got there, you know, lots of natural light, lots of space, nothing's nailed down. So they can do all kinds of things with their liturgical space to make it more circular. And we were talking about, you know, in time, when Gwich'in art begins to appear in the decoration of that building, it's going to be more and more their church. It's not going to just be the Anglican Church in the community, it's going to be the Gwich'in Church in the community, right? And I said to Bishop Larry Robertson and the chief, I said, it'd be great, you know, in a community where caribou is very important, right? It's the food supply. Everything depends on the caribou. You know, wouldn't it be neat in a place like that if the scriptures were kind of held up on a set of caribou antlers, right? Or the altar, a slab of wood held up by caribou antlers. I mean, that's, when you do that, then it seems to me that we're beginning to get what self-determination means, honoring the culture and the traditions of Indigenous peoples.
Yeah, it's so important to our people to have that from the community, working as one of, even with the abandoned council. I mean, it's just, you don't hear about that. And, I wish we had more stories we could tell all of Canada that the Anglican Church has done with the people in northern Yukon and how they built things. That's how we did it in the old days. We sat as a group, we taught, and at the end of the day we came out with the solution, just as you described here. And it touches me quite deeply that you've done that with our people. So, I mean, I keep praising you because I think you've led the way and helped us with being recognized and working with us. So.
I've learned a lot, and I'm still learning a lot.
We all do.
And Jerry, you'll appreciate this. When I, you know, the primate is invited to the Sacred Circle every 3 years, right? And I remember when Donna Baumberry was the coordinator for Indigenous Ministries. She was there a long time and did great, great work. And so I was made primate in 2007, so my first Sacred Circle was 2009 in Port Elgin. And I'll never forget it, she came down to my office and said, I need to talk to you. And I said, of course, Donna. And she said, so you're coming to Sacred Circle? And I said, yes, I'm really grateful for the invitation. And she said, okay, here's the rules. And here are the rules. Show up, shut up, and speak up when you're invited to. But Donna, you know what, Donna, we laugh about that, but that was really helpful because Donna helped me understand that the primate's role at a Sacred Circle is in fact to listen and learn. And in my experience, they've often invited me to preach at the opening service and the closing service. Well, you can prepare for the opening one, right? Because you know there's a theme and you have some sense of what's going to be on docket for the week. You can't prepare the closing sermon for that sacred circle because you have to experience it.
Yes.
You have to listen with the ear and hopefully with the heart, you know. And so that's been a great gift to me, to be able to listen and to learn and to you know, to build relationships with people. And I think that self-determination is something we all just have to keep figuring it out, you know, and so with reconciliation. You know, it's not something that you know, I can just declare, well, we're going to be reconciled. You know, if I deeply hurt you, then I have to say, Jerry, you know, I'm really sorry for what I did. And then I have to be, I think, quiet enough and humble enough to just step back and give you space and time to think about what I've said. And also, hopefully, in that space and time, you can see something of a changed behavior on my part, that I'm not quite so sure of everything. I'm not quite so, I'm not arrogant spiritually. You know? You can see some change in me in terms of how I regard you and how I desire to relate to you. And then when you begin to see that, then maybe we begin to have a conversation about our relationship is feeling different, right? And then together we figure out what's the best way we could convey that to people, you know, in terms of a gesture or an act or a story or a statement, whatever. So these journeys are long. As the Beatles would say, long and winding road. They're long and winding roads. Yes, I am that old.
Yeah, I just want to, again, thank you for doing what we do. And that's talking in oral tradition. You've learned that from our people. And you're talking the truth from your heart, not from script. So to me, reconciliation is not just about talking as you said, but talking from your heart. And I think you've done that. And you watched oral tradition in its best by a man, you know, that's really believing in our people. So again, many thanks to that. So.
One of the things we're going to do at General Synod too, which I think is going to be a really exciting thing, is, you know, we have the calendar, the church year and calendar, which we remember holy men and women like we remember Bede today, right? Well, we're going to add to our calendar the date of August the 6th and the date of April the 22nd or 24th. August the 6th, 1993 was when Archbishop Piers offered the apology. So that's going to be commemorated every year now in the calendar of the Anglican Church of Canada. And then April the 24th, 1994, will also be commemorated every year as a reminder to us of these watershed moments in our journey together as Indigenous peoples and non-Indigenous peoples within the Anglican Church of Canada. So we won't be just marking the big anniversaries, but we'll be being reminded every year of this journey to which God is calling
us. What will need to happen at General Synod to continue toward a self-determining Indigenous church?
Well, I think in terms of what will need to happen at General Synod, excuse me, will be the church's attention in the Synod to the resolutions. There's also around Canon 22, the National Indigenous Ministry, and the very practical changes that have that are coming to the Florida General Synod. I might say that all the changes to Canon 22 that are coming to General Synod are coming as a result of conversation between the Anglican Council of Indigenous Peoples and the governance working group of the Council of General Synod. So there's been lots of conversation within ASIP and the governance working group, and ASIP has had a huge part in making sure the language is right in terms of the canon. So there'll be the work in the Synod itself. And we're also taking a good chunk of time in the General Synod to view a documentary which was produced by Anglican Video. This documentary is the work that came out of the Primates Commission that I established in 2013 on discovery, reconciliation, and justice. The 20th anniversary of the apology was coming, and so I went to ASIP and I said, how do you think we should observe it? And they said, we'll think about that, and we'll get back to you. And they took a few months to do that. They thought about it, they prayed about it, and they came back to me and said, Fred, you need to establish a commission on the doctrine of discovery. And so I said, can we add a couple other pieces to it, reconciliation and justice? And they said, that's great. And so what happened was the commission has done its work. And on the mandate of the doctrine of discovery and educating the church about that doctrine and its history and legacy to this day, they proposed that a documentary be produced. So it's been produced by Anglican Video. It's called Stolen Land, Strong Hearts. It was premiered a couple of months ago now, and I think most of us were absolutely wowed when Bob Watts, who's Chief of Staff for National Chief Perry Belgrade, came to the screening. He was invited, of course, but at the end of it, he stood up and he looked at this rather crowded theater room, and he said, this was an amazing documentary, and he said, I want to tell you that if you think this documentary has any value in educating members of the Anglican Church of Canada, I want to tell you that this documentary has a life that could possibly impact the entire country. So we are going to see that documentary at the General Synod, and people say, well, how long is it? And I say, well, it's about 68 minutes. But it just moves, you know, and it features, you know, many Indigenous leaders from within our church. It features Bishop Mark. It features, I have a few lines in it myself, other church leaders, and then we've got, I mean, it's amazing that they were able to get a commitment from Justice Sinclair to be part of this documentary. And he has quite a chunk of time within it. And the National Chief, Perry Belgrade. Like, that is very exciting, I think, that could even happen, you know. And so that'll be part of the General Synod as well. Under the theme of reconciliation, the General Synod is going to entertain a motion that will enshrine within the committee structures of the General Synod a permanent committee for healing and reconciliation, truth, justice, and reconciliation. And so that means that it will have the same kind of importance in the life of our church as other committees like finance and faith, worship, and ministry, and public witness for ecological and social justice, global relations. What it says is that truth and justice and reconciliation is a priority for the Anglican Church of Canada. So I'm really excited to see that coming forward, and I'm confident that the Synod is going to approve it. And then the third piece of that mandate was around justice. And so in 2016, Bishop Mark and I commissioned a council of elders and youth to hold our church accountable for its public declaration on the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. and they renamed themselves the Vision Keepers. Well, now the Vision Keepers are going to become, in the language of the motion, is a permanent forum within the Anglican Church of Canada. So that's a very exciting development. And then we have finally we have a commission called the Jubilee Commission. They were just formed within this last year, and they'll make a preliminary report to Synod, but part of their task is to do a survey of how, in fact, the Anglican Church of Canada has financially supported Indigenous ministries through the years, and how we are allocating financial resources to support the emerging of the self-determining Indigenous church. So so some really significant things are going to happen at this General Synod, I think, to honor, this call from God to be supportive of the vision of the elders.
Yeah, I mean, it's just having elders to oversee that. That's, again, a big move on the Anglican Church to ensure that it's done properly. And I think that's, again, a first for our community here, that we don't get that in general community either. It's just, again, a very good beginning. I appreciate you being here with us. Do you have any questions at all?
Well, I think in the interest of time, we actually need to move on, but we're
Can I just say one thing on behalf of Bishop Sid? If Sid was sitting in this chair, he would really want to say to you, Jerry, and to the Archbishop and Synod that he feels, and he feels passionately about this, that as important as it is to listen to the elders, Sid always says, and we have to listen to the young people.
Yes.
We have to listen to the young people and their hopes, their struggles, their dreams. We need to come alongside them, he says, and walk with them and nurture them for the leadership that they must in the future exercise in their communities. Sid is a big heart for the youth.
Yes.
And their voice in the midst of all these conversations.
Yeah, but I saw that at Sacred Circle,
Yes.
where the
Yes.
youth are totally included,
Yeah.
and their words are as important, or
Totally.
not more important than us political people.
Well,
But it's it's just amazing to watch these young folks, and one was a firekeeper, and he was learning and taking care of businesses you learn from an elder. Like, it's just very important to have both, and I think I was very happy to see that. Thank you so much again.
Thank you,
thank
Jerry.
you. Let's give them
Thank you.
both